If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and reached a conclusion, but left the public divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases, guys. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth? Well, that's another story. Today's case is one of ambition, deception, and the murky line between brilliance and malice. We're talking about Elizabeth Holmes, the once revered CEO of Theranos. She promised a healthcare revolution with a machine that could perform hundreds of blood tests with just a finger prick. Backed by high-profile investors, her company soared to a valuation of $9 billion. Holmes became a Silicon Valley icon, celebrated for her vision and her drive. But as the veil lifted, the dream began to crumble, revealing a reality of inaccurate tests, patient misdiagnoses, and manipulation on a massive scale. When Holmes was eventually charged, the world watched as prosecutors painted her as a fraudster who knowingly deceived investors, patients, and even her own employees. But here's where the controversy begins. Holmes' defense argued that she was a true believer in her vision, that she was a woman whose passion to help others might have clouded her judgment. Was she mad, driven by a genuine belief that her technology would eventually work? Or was she simply bad, intentionally misleading others for her own gain? The court has delivered its ruling, but was justice truly served? Or is there more to the story? Did Elizabeth Holmes knowingly deceive the world? Or was she just another ambitious entrepreneur caught in a web of impossible promises and technological failures? There is that documentary out there, and maybe a lot of you, maybe all of you, some of you saw that documentary on this. It actually was very good, but there are details that these documentaries and the media just don't give everybody because it doesn't feed whatever narrative that is. Here, we're going to get into this case, so listen closely as we unravel the evidence, the court's findings, and the contrasting perspectives that have the public completely divided on this. By the end of this episode, you're going to have the chance to decide for yourself. Today in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion, we ask, Elizabeth Holmes, mad or bad? Elizabeth Holmes, she captivated the world with a vision that seemed almost too good to be true. Her claim, a single drop of blood pricked from a fingertip could provide the data needed for hundreds of medical tests, revolutionizing healthcare and making complex diagnostics available to everyone, anytime. This was a vision that not only sparked hope, but promised to overhaul the entire healthcare system. I mean, just imagine. But as time went on, the promise of Theranos began to unravel. Whistleblowers came forward, confidential documents were leaked, and eventually, journalists began to probe the story more deeply. The heart of the question in this case lies in Holmes' intent. Did she genuinely believe in her mission, even if the technology was not quite there yet? Or did she knowingly deceive her investors, her patients, the employees, putting countless lives at risk to maintain her own billionaire status and Silicon Valley acclaim? In court, the prosecution argued that Holmes knowingly misled investors and patients, claiming her device, the Edison, could perform a wide array of tests when in reality it was often inaccurate or unable to conduct the tests it promised. Prosecutors painted a picture of Holmes as a master manipulator, using charm and ambition and a carefully crafted persona, complete with her signature black turtleneck and deep voice, to build a sense of mystique and credibility. Her powerful backers, from former U.S. secretaries of state to influential venture capitalists, they supported her without question. But did they fall victim to a con? Or were they just blinded by their own eagerness to be a part of the next big thing? On the other hand, the defense presented Holmes as a determined visionary, one who believed in her mission with a single-minded intensity. They argued that her actions, while flawed, were driven by an idealistic desire to make a difference, to revolutionize healthcare, and to ultimately help people. They claimed that Holmes was simply overly optimistic, trusting that her technology would eventually catch up to her promises. Her lawyers argued that she never intended to harm anyone, and her only fault was, perhaps, believing too deeply in her own potential and in the power of her ideas. They painted her not as a villain, but as an entrepreneur who fell victim to Silicon Valley's fake it till you make it culture, where ambition sometimes trumps caution. And then to add another layer, there's also the question of whether Holmes was a puppet in her own empire. The defense brought up her relationship with Ramesh Sunny Balwani, her former boyfriend and COO of Theranos. Balwani, 20 years her senior, was alleged to have had a profound influence over Holmes, both personally and professionally. Her defense suggested that he not only controlled aspects of the company, but also manipulated Holmes herself in ways that impacted her judgment. They argued that Holmes was young, impressionable, and possibly under his sway. Could it be that Balwani's influence drove Holmes to decisions she might not have made on her own? Was she a young visionary with a mission exploited by a more seasoned businessman with his own motives? This case raises a compelling dilemma. Is Elizabeth Holmes a villain who knowingly orchestrated one of the largest frauds in modern business history? Or was she really a visionary whose ambition clouded her ability to see reality? Perhaps she falls somewhere in between, a complex figure shaped by her ambitions, circumstances, and the pressures of Silicon Valley. As you listen to the details of her case, keep this question in mind. Is Elizabeth Holmes truly responsible for the downfall of Theranos? Or was she caught in a culture that rewards risk-taking and promises of greatness, even when the path to that greatness is anything but clear? We know the court has made its decision. We know the documentary's out there. This is all said and done, right? But in the court of public opinion, this question remains as controversial and thought-provoking as ever. Today we're not only examining the facts of this case still, but the character of the woman behind them. The prosecution believes it was a scheme, while the defense argues it was a dream. Either way, the fallout from her choices has reshaped lives, careers, and perspectives on innovation and accountability, and in ways that are simply too difficult to ignore. Elizabeth Holmes' journey from a bright Stanford dropout to a convicted felon, it's a complex tale woven with ambition and secrecy and high-stakes promises. At that age of 19, Holmes leaves Stanford University. That's young. To pursue a dream she claimed had been with her since she was younger than that, to revolutionize healthcare with a simple blood test. And she founded Theranos in 2003, branding it as a disruptive force in the medical technology space. Holmes envisioned a machine that could conduct hundreds of blood tests using just a finger prick. For patients who feared needles or had limited access to regular health care, this sounded like a game changer. With this vision, she captivated Silicon Valley and beyond, attracting high profile investors and establishing herself as a rising star as a woman in the tech world. Theranos quickly became the darling of the media, and Holmes was heralded as the next Steve Jobs. I mean, this is her dream come true. She wore her black turtlenecks. She spoke in a low, distinct voice. She presented herself with an aura of mystery and control that fascinated the public and her investors. Her list of supporters was long and impressive. Like I said, secretaries of state, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, as well as high-profile investors like Rupert Murdoch and the Walton family. By 2013, Theranos had partnered with Walgreens, planning to roll out testing centers in thousands of stores across the U.S. And for a while, everything really did seem to be falling into place. The technology, however, that was a different story. Holmes had promised that the Edison machine would provide fast, accurate, and cheap blood test results. But in reality, the Edison was anything but reliable. In secret, Theranos began using commercial machines from companies like Siemens to run the tests that their technology couldn't handle, but was supposed to be doing. The few tests that were conducted in the Edison, they were often inaccurate, sometimes dangerously so, putting patients' lives at risk because they were giving wrong results. In some cases, patients received tests suggesting that they had a serious condition, cancer or HIV, and they did not. That is serious. But despite the issues, Holmes and her team pushed forward. And this is one of those times. This is an important part of this because Holmes could have stopped what she was doing right here to really try to figure out how to get it right. She had the people that believed in her. But she pushed forward. They kept the technology's failures under wraps, and employees who raised concerns, they were often silenced, intimidated. According to whistleblowers, including former employees like Tyler Schultz, the grandson of George Schultz, Theranos was a company where dissent was not tolerated. Employees who raised ethical or practical concerns, they were met with legal threats, and some were even fired. Holmes was reportedly unyielding in her mission and, according to some accounts, ignored advice and concerns that could have saved the company from the brink. So what kind of control is that? You have this young, smart woman who is going against her own better judgment by her own choice. Clearly, something has happened to her. She's under a spell of some kind. What is it? Well, whatever it was, she doubles down, allegedly instructing her team to continue misleading both investors and the public about what their technology could actually do. Then came the Wall Street Journal expose. This is in 2015. Investigative journalist John Carreyrou published an article revealing the inaccuracies and the failures of Theranos' technology, and this was backed by the testimony of whistleblowers. This article led to a rapid unraveling of Theranos' carefully constructed public image. Investors began asking questions. Walgreens paused its partnership, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted an investigation, finding serious issues in Theranos' lab practices. Holmes publicly dismissed Carreyrou's article, though, calling it inaccurate and biased. So here she goes again, not addressing it, but just going right through it. She continued to maintain that Theranos was on the verge of a breakthrough. However, as more information came to light, the tide turned. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission launched an investigation, as did federal prosecutors. Holmes and her then boyfriend and COO, Sonny, were eventually charged with multiple counts of fraud. Can you imagine? The SEC accused Holmes of an elaborate, years-long fraud in which they exaggerated or made false statements about the company's technology, business, and financial performance. And why I'm saying, can you imagine, is because what I personally am wondering is if you are under the spell of your own self delusion, right? That you are going to be this billionaire and going to change the world and it just can't be anything else. What happens when you are hit with the truth that it's actually not working? I would love to know what happens inside the brain when your delusion is hit. What did they think? Well, in court, prosecutors present a wealth of evidence to prove that Holmes and Balwani knowingly misled investors and patients. This evidence included emails, internal documents, testimony from former employees. It was all over the place. And prosecutors argued that Holmes knew the Edison machine did not work, but yet she continued to promote it. One email exchange between Holmes and Balwani, for example, showed them discussing the inaccuracies of their own technology, yet they continued to present it as fully functional to their investors. The prosecution painted Holmes as a calculated fraudster who was willing to put lives at risk to maintain her own company's reputation and attract more investment, of course. But then there's the defense. They're always there, aren't they? They countered these claims by highlighting Holmes' genuine belief in her technology and her mission. And they argued that Holmes was deeply committed to her vision and did not intend to deceive anyone. Instead, they said she was a young entrepreneur caught in the fake it till you make it culture of Silicon Valley. They presented her as someone who believed her technology would eventually succeed and argued that any inaccuracies or issues were the result of growing pains, not deliberate fraud. The defense also presented Holmes as a victim of her own boyfriend, Sunny Balwani, and his influence. They claimed that Balwani was controlling and abusive, both emotionally and mentally, and that he played a significant role in decision-making at Theranos. Holmes testified herself that Balwani held substantial power in the company, often overriding her decisions or pushing her to make unethical choices. This testimony, it was key in framing Holmes as someone who might not have been fully in control of Theranos' day-to-day operations. The defense argued that Balwani's influence was a significant factor in the company's downfall, and that Holmes, while imperfect, did not intentionally set out to defraud anyone. The prosecution countered that Holmes was no puppet. They argued that she was the mastermind, in fact, behind Theranos, and that her image and persona were carefully crafted in order to maintain control and attract investors. The black turtleneck, that deep voice, the confident public persona, they were all a part of a deliberate attempt to project authority and vision. In their view, Holmes was a brilliant manipulator who knew exactly what she was doing, using her charm and intelligence to build a false narrative around Theranos. As the trial progressed, the public became increasingly divided. Some viewed Holmes as a symbol of Silicon Valley's excesses, a cautionary tale of what can happen when ambition and deception intersect. Others saw her as a visionary who stumbled, someone whose desire to change the world led her down a dark path. The evidence was damning, but Holmes' unwavering belief in her mission left some wondering if she truly understood the extent of the damage she caused. Fast forward to January of 2022, and the jury finds Holmes guilty on 4 counts of fraud, with each count carrying significant prison time. Her conviction sent shockwaves through the tech world, sparking debates about the ethical responsibilities of entrepreneurs and the limits of Silicon Valley's move fast and break things mentality. But the question remains, was Elizabeth Holmes a brilliant mind blinded by her dreams? Or was she a skilled con artist who exploited those around her? Was her downfall the result of misguided ambition? Or was it a calculated plan that finally came crashing down? Remember, the court has ruled, but the public opinion remains split. The trial of Elizabeth Holmes drew intense public attention, not just for its courtroom drama, but for the broader questions it raised about Silicon Valley culture, the healthcare industry, and the nature of ambition. Long after the verdict, Holmes' case continues to stir debate. At the heart of the controversy is the stark contrast between the image Holmes projected, a pioneering CEO on a mission to democratize healthcare, and the reality of Theranos' faulty technology and questionable practices. The media's portrayal of Holmes as a villain or visionary has only deepened the divide in public opinion. The media was all over this. One of the main points of contention is the culture in which Holmes thrived. In Silicon Valley, at that time, risk taking very much celebrated, okay? Phrases like fake it till you make it were very common, probably still are. Startups are expected to promise big and worry about delivery later. Because, of course, you can figure it out. You just want to get the people involved with you, especially if the potential impact is massive. And for Holmes, it was. Now, for some, Holmes' behavior was not unusual for the tech industry, and they argue that many very successful founders faced similar struggles and setbacks before eventually delivering their promises. Now, in this view, Holmes was just following the same path, a path that was already cut out before her, embodying the optimism and drive that Silicon Valley encouraged. But in Holmes' case, the stakes were higher. She was dealing with healthcare, where failure here could mean real consequences for real lives. The nature of Theranos' business also added fuel to the controversy. Because unlike many other tech products that can fail and they don't cause direct harm to a person, healthcare products require a higher standard of reliability and accuracy because we're dealing with people here. Patients who trusted Theranos received inaccurate test results. Some of those patients made life-altering decisions based on those results. For many, this crossed a line. While ambition is often seen as a positive trait in business, maybe not so when lives are at risk, okay? That ambition becomes dangerous. Critics argue that Holmes should have understood the gravity of her promises and that her decision to push forward despite the risks was reckless, if not outright malicious. She did say that she was interested in all of this at a very young age. How can you not know how important the results of blood tests are? They can change your life. They can make or break your future. Another aspect that continues to divide the public is Holmes' unique persona. Her black turtleneck, that deep voice again, and your intense gaze, it became iconic. I mean, if you, even in the documentary, these are the things that they're focusing on because it was very specific to her look. And many saw her as a confident, mysterious figure who kind of seemed larger than life. Who is this woman? This image, combined with all that success in attracting her powerful allies, it all helped elevate her to a rare level of fame. But when she fell, when Theranos fell, that same image became a target for scrutiny. Some see her public persona as part of a deliberate strategy. Like they've all been duped. This strategy to look this way and act this way so as to manipulate those around her, arguing that her carefully curated image, it all was designed to lend her an air of credibility and intelligence, concealing the truth about her and her company's capabilities. Others, however, see her as a young woman who's just trying to fit into a world dominated by powerful men. So what if one of them was her idol and she tried to be like him, crafting an image that would command respect in an industry not always kind to women? This is a fact. And then, of course, we have the role of the media. They are never outside of these cases, okay? They are an entirely other element. And here, it's another element that keeps the case alive in the public's eye, right? That's what the media does for cases like this, which only helps the media. right? They're not really helping you. It's helping them stay relevant and talking so that you will listen. We need to pay attention to what they are saying. Holmes was a media darling. Okay, the media loved her before Theranos collapsed, of course. She graced the covers of magazines and she was hailed as a self made billionaire and a disruptor. The same media, though, that once celebrated her later became one of her harshest critics. Remember, the media follows what your interests are, not really what you need to know, okay? But being one of her harshest critics, they were able to amplify the accusations, help shape public opinion. For some, this shift highlights the fickle nature of media narratives and it raises questions about how much of Holmes' downfall was the result of a fair trial versus trial by media. I mean, was she unfairly targeted? Or did the media simply expose a deeper truth? The debate over media influence only adds another layer of complexity to this story. There is so much going on here. Perhaps the most enduring aspect, though, of the controversy is the question of Holmes' intent. Those who see her as mad argue that she was swept up in her vision, a victim of her own idealism and the culture around her. And they believe that she genuinely wanted to make a difference, but became blind to the consequences of her own actions, making poor decisions out of hope rather than malice. But there's the other side. They saw her as bad, believing she knowingly put others at risk. She manipulated the system and those around her, and she did it all for personal gain and fame. And for them, her actions represent a betrayal of trust on a massive scale, and her conviction was well deserved. This unresolved tension between mad and bad is what makes Holmes' case so compelling. The court delivered a verdict, but in the court of public opinion, her character remains an open question. Was Elizabeth Holmes a visionary who flew too close to the sun, or a calculated con artist who played her audience like a fiddle? This question, as yet unanswered, continues to fuel debates in homes, workplaces, online forums, keeping this case alive long after the final gavel. All right, well, as we come to a close on this one, you've heard the arguments, the evidence, and the perspectives that make the case of Elizabeth Holmes both fascinating and divisive. On one hand, Holmes is seen by some as a determined young entrepreneur, driven by a desire to make healthcare accessible and affordable for all. Her supporters argue that she believed deeply in her mission and that her mistakes were those of an idealist, a woman swept up in her vision, perhaps to a fault. She believed that Theranos could change the world and was willing to push boundaries to make that happen. There's also the reality of the impact of her choices, the impact on real people. Patients trusted her technology, often basing very critical healthcare decisions on the results of Theranos tests. I mean, blood tests don't lie, right? Some experienced unnecessary stress and fear, while others potentially faced serious risks because of inaccurate results. The prosecution's case highlighted these impacts, framing Holmes as a skilled manipulator who knowingly gambled with others' lives and resources to maintain her own status and power. So, where does the truth lie? Was Elizabeth Holmes simply too ambitious, caught up in a Silicon Valley culture that rewards this risk and promise? Or did she cross a line? Is she mad, as some suggest? A visionary who got in over her head so far that she dipped right into her own self-made delusion that she can make it, that there are no real consequences, not yet. She just needs to get there. Or was she just plain bad, a con artist who masterly played a role to achieve her own ends? At the end of the day, the court of public opinion will likely remain as divided as it's ever been on this. Some are going to see Holmes as a tragic figure, this young woman who aimed too high. And others are going to see her as a symbol of Silicon Valley's excesses. What do you think? In your view, was justice truly served in this case? Or is there more to the story than the court's verdict could capture? One thing is maybe she didn't start out bad, right? Maybe she really did want to help the healthcare industry. But when it stops working and people are still relying on it, what happens then? It would seem that that is the moment when something takes over, either truth for something genuine or a disbelief that you can fail. And that delusion can sometimes lead people to do anything at any cost. What's your verdict? Thank you for joining me in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there, guys. Stay out of trouble. Stay curious. Until next time, this is Alexis Knight.